Let's call the meeting to order June 4th, 2024. Can we have the roll?
Councilmember Evans?
Present.
Councilmember Edwards?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Randolph?
Here.
Mayor Millman?
Here.
Councilmember Best-Campbell?
Present.
Councilmember Arndt?
Here.
And Councilmember Taylor?
Present. Stand for the flag, please. Flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I move to accept the agenda in order and content.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. No special presentations. We have public comments. We have somebody virtually that would like to comment. Is that what I understand? Is it Mr. Banneker? Kevin, is that Mr.
Am I clear to go?
Yeah, Mr. Banneker, you have 3 minutes. State your name and whether you live in the city limits, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Millman, Deputy Mayor Randolph, members of the council. My name is Randy Banneker, and I'm here on behalf of the Seattle-King County Realtors. I'm not a Woodinville resident. I want to thank you for the opportunity to comment. Very quickly, I simply urge your adoption of item 7 tonight, Ordinance 766, the sign code update. I wish to thank you, your planning commission, and your staff for the many hours of hard work required to craft this strong update. Thank you very much and good evening.
Thank you. We have any other public commentary? That's it? Virtual? Okay. First up, Rosa Antoine.
Thank you. Rosa Antoine. I live in Woodinville, and I like it here. And I have a couple of comments to make about... thank you. Okay. What's happened recently in my life is that I was informed that my rent was going to go up again, $300 a month. Now, I'm on Social Security and a pension. I'm not rich, but I do nicely, kind of where I'm at right now. It started out, I was paying $15.95 a month for a 1-bedroom, 2 bedrooms, actually. And that went on for about a year, and then when the old owners had sold the place, but before they left, they raised us $100 a month. I thought, well, that's reasonable, you know, because I know they hadn't done it for a while. And then the new people came in. And this year, which is the second year that they've been involved, they're going to raise my rent, $300 a month. I took it to the property manager, had a nice chat with him, explained to him that I wasn't made of money and that this was, you know, taking me right out of the market. They came back with an offer of $200 a month. I still haven't signed the lease. They said that we could either sign the lease for the amount they were asking us for or not and just do month to month. I haven't done month to month in years. I've always had a lease, but I haven't signed it because I don't know what I'm going to be able to do. If I'm going to be able to, I'm still at the old rate of $19.95 a month for my 2-bedroom. And they're going to raise it up another $200, which will put it at 122, something like that. Anyway, this is shocking to somebody who came from California, where we had rent control. They couldn't do that to us there. And you just, it didn't matter if somebody was new buying it. There were no exceptions. It was just what it was. I said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Arndt.
Sorry, Ms. Antoine, I have a question for you, if I may. How much notice did your landlords provide with the rent increase?
They gave about 2.5 months, I think it was, which was kind of reasonable. Maybe it was 3, I'm not sure. My mind kind of went a little crazy after I got that first notice. But, I'm looking at it and going, well, I'll give up this, and this, and see if I can hang on to my hobbit hole. And that's what I'm doing.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Kevin Stadler.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Kevin Stadler. I do live within the city limits of Woodinville. As always, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I hope you're enjoying your January so far. I'm here to cause good trouble tonight. I want to talk to you about the community grant program. I believe it was in March you awarded the community grants, and at that time, a representative from the Woodinville Repertory Theater came to this podium, Heather McAdams, and talked to you about the things that they were going to do with that grant. One of the things that they mentioned is that they already had going was a writing class that they were hosting at the Woodinville Heritage Museum. So I just wanted to come back on that and let you know that, yes, we did host them. It was a great opportunity. They had, I think, 6 participants in the class that met there on 6 or 8 Sundays. It was a win-win for both organizations, and that culminated last Saturday. They presented what they call sips and scripts down at DeLille, at the restaurant at DeLille in their upstairs room. And this is where all 6 of these writers, their 10-minute plays were presented to an audience. It was a great event, a packed house. Lots of wine and food purchased, and I can show you my Visa bill if you doubt me at all. But I just want to let you know what a great program that is and how grateful I think the organizations in the city are and the people that get to participate in these. And I really think it's essential that we do this. The Woodinville Repertory Theater I think this is their 26th year, so they're a long time organization, long before the city was even started, or about the same time. The Heritage Society next year celebrates its 50th year here in Woodinville. So I think we just need to recognize those, or pay attention to those organizations that have been a part of this community for a long time and continue to support them. Again, thank you for your support of the organizations in the city.
Thank you. I have a motion for the consent calendar.
I move to accept the consent calendar as written.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to our first business item number 12, discussion of exploration of school zone traffic safety cameras. And I think Chief Myers is going to take this.
That's me.
Thank you, Chief.
As I'm bringing this up, and since I have the mic, if you'll let me introduce my partner that's here in the back of the room. This is Sergeant Thomas. Delson Thomas joined us in Woodinville PD last month. So he's the new face around here. You don't have to come up, don't worry. He's has worked in several other city departments prior to joining the sheriff's office. He's a veteran sergeant in the sheriff's office that came here taking Sergeant Nazaria's spot. We're lucky to have Delson. He's got big shoes to fill, losing Tully, but we're really pleased to have him. He's working our night shift now, so you'll see him maybe at council meetings or in the evenings as a supervisor out there. So we're glad to have him. Say hi when you get a chance.
What area did he come from? Where?
He most recently had been working in our property management unit within the sheriff's office. He's also been in our shoreline police contract. He's worked unincorporated out here, city of Renton, city of Montlake Terrace, Metro Police. Yeah, he's been around, so he's well seasoned. Glad to have him.
Welcome.
Tonight's presentation is, I'm giving the presentation, but I did not do all of this work. Thanks to Jared and Kevin for the help on this. So today we're going to talk about speed safety cameras. This is going to be a pretty high-level discussion meant to give you enough information to see whether we want to continue to do some more work on this. We can answer questions and then hopefully just gauge your interest. I'll say that the timing on this discussion is driven by the conversation that was kicked off with the CIP discussion. There's really no reason that we can't move at your pace on this. And I think it's a worthy conversation and a project to look at, but there's really nothing driving that this needs to be done right this minute on it. By a show of hands, if I can, how many people have seen one of these school speed zone cameras, know what we're talking about? Okay, and then keep your hand up if you've got a ticket. No, I'm not, no, don't, nope. I will say that I will confess that I did get a ticket at one of Kirkland's speed cameras in a school zone really near my house when I first moved to town. And it was in a work car. It was not a marked police car, but it was a work car. So I saw the flash. As soon as I got where I was going, I called the person who I knew would be getting that ticket in the mail that was sent to the sheriff's office and told them it was me, just send it to me. I'm falling on my sword on that one. So I have paid the city of Kirkland $130 or $120 and have never made that mistake again. So why speed safety cameras? The real number one reason is road safety. You can see from this that crashes in Woodinville are more likely than in some of our neighboring cities. Crashes in Woodinville are also back up to pre-pandemic levels. That's not just a statewide thing, although that's true for the state as well, but it holds true for Woodinville also. Just looking at some of our neighboring cities around here, our residents get in more crashes than they do in other cities. I'll just say it's worth noting that this slide is the first one when we're talking about why are we talking about this. This is not a slide about revenue generation or police budgets or potential enforcement numbers necessarily. This is about road safety, and I think that's important, kind of the important frame to think about why you would consider doing a project like this. We shared in the staff report this map, which is pulled from 5 years worth of WSDOT crash data. We use that. It's not the only thing that we could use to kind of talk about this discussion, but it was a jumping off point. WSDOT data is really easily available. If we did a speed study, which is really also relevant to this discussion because the speed cameras are meant to impact speed primarily and then crashes as a down the road result. If we did a speed study throughout Woodinville, we'd likely see what these Washington and King County studies have shown, which is that most drivers speed. When the public works trailer gets put out somewhere and we are doing checking numbers somewhere or we're doing counts in certain neighborhoods, we find something very similar to this in every time we do it, no matter what the road is. So there is reason to think that Woodinville is like every other city in our area and in our county where speed is a problem. This last comment here, think about this as a complement to more difficult road design work to reduce speeds. This is not the only way to impact drivers, right? We know that there's lots of other ways that the city works to impact driver behavior, whether it's other signage, other speed measuring devices, certainly road design that we've talked about here being another way. I think all of those are still things that we should be thinking about for, these hot spots and any other place. But a speed safety camera can be seen as a, self-funding, pretty easy to install way to also, a tool to also work on that, on increased safety. And then some of those other road safety projects that take more time and more money can still be other options.
Chief,
Yeah.
while we have that slide up, can you identify the schools that are highlighted there that have some of the crashes near them?
Yep.
Because I don't, there's a couple in there, I'm not sure what schools those are.
And we can show this a little bit more. And these are not precise measurements as far as like what the school zone is. This was just a kind of our GIS analyst quickly throwing together what we think the boundaries would roughly be. Oh, you got a laser? Oh, it's not working. Okay, sorry. So starting at the top, that top left portion of that map is Woodinville High School. And then the little school just outside in Bothell right there is Woodin Elementary. Next, coming down and to the right is Wellington and Leota in that big bubble to the right where there's not a lot of collisions. Just below that, and this is a little bit, we'd have to do some research. There's both the Mac Elementary, that's the BCS private school that's just outside of our border, and then a Montessori school on Woodinville Duval Road is the little one that you see there. Coming down just south of the downtown area on 140th and 171st is the Bright Horizons preschool. And then on the Woodred is Chrysalis. And then it's not really shown here because it's in Bothell, but we do have a portion of Woodmore Elementary School at the very corner, like far left corner of that, down towards the bottom. There was another school zone there. And so we'll talk about this a little bit more. Private schools and public schools both qualify when it comes to school zones potentially for this RCW.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
What is the distance around each school zone that the school zone mileage or the speed is enforced? Is it a quarter mile? Is it less than that?
300 feet.
300
feet from, the school boundary or a marked, entrance or exit. There may be another way. Yeah, that's rough. That's generally kind of what we're going off of. There's another school zone, school walk zone that gets a little bit more technical if you're showing that certain areas is the walking path for students to get to that school. It might extend that boundary a little bit, but generally 300 feet from the school boundary is what we consider.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a lot of partner cities that have put in cameras and are thinking about putting in cameras. And so we have a little bit of data from some of the cities that have had these for a while, Kirkland and Seattle being two of them that have done some good research into how their numbers have been affected. And so we see that there is a drop in violations after cameras are installed. The idea being that these change behavior and that we tend to see that in these neighboring cities. Also, most drivers won't make the mistake twice. Just like my experience in Kirkland, is that once you get one of those, you don't want to do it again. And so 9 out of 10 drivers, both in Kirkland and Seattle, they don't ever see that name again on their infractions. Thinking about this being a tool that targets speed and safety, and I would say that this, if we implemented a speed safety camera program, this would be an increase in enforcement for Woodinville. This would not be changing work from the police department being out there doing it to these cameras. We don't do this reliably. And so this would really be implementing something that is an increase in enforcement and an increase in safety in those areas because we don't have the staff to regularly do it, let alone do it the way that a camera could efficiently and reliably. Revenue from this.
Got a question, Councilmember Taylor?
Yep.
Yeah, if we go back, what areas are we proposing
I will get, if you'll bear
Oh,
with me, I think that's the slide
all right.
after this one. Revenue on this, basically after costs are subtracted out, then at this time gets shared with the state. It goes into a fund that they use for traffic safety related grants. Right now it's a 50-50 share. The law that goes into effect on Thursday changes that so that after a camera has been up for 4 years, then it reduces the state's cut of that to 25%. So we'd be seeing a little bit more revenue coming back. I don't have a lot of info on it at this point, but I will say that there are several ways that cities implement this program. Some is to buy all the equipment outright, to have staff run it 100%. There are also vendors that will run this program for jurisdictions. And there are vendors that will run it in a fully violator-funded scheme, where there's no initial outlay from the city. Of course, they're taking their cut from each infraction, but there are programs like that. There's a bunch of different ones out there. We don't have details on all of those, but that would be work that we would do if the council's interested, is to come back and see which of those schemes we favor here in Woodinville. So where speed safety cameras can be used. For Woodinville, it's generally going to be these 3 types of categories here: school speed zones, school walk areas, or public park speed zones. Right now, in Woodinville, we only have marked school speed zones. But we could consider marking school walk areas if we have such, or public park zones. No matter where we put a speed safety camera, no matter the location, it still needs to meet sort of a minimum justification for need for it to be there, and a whole bunch of other sort of balancing tests of equity and impact on people that drive there, people that live in the neighborhood, all kinds of other things. But there is sort of kind of like a baseline that you have to meet with that. I think that likely we wouldn't have much trouble meeting it, because really it just shows that there's a reason to think that speed is a problem in these areas. Like we say, most speed studies show that speed is a problem. I would imagine that we would see that too. Also, the RCW also authorizes that outside of some of these specifically marked areas, cities can get additional cameras to put outside of like the marked school zone or marked park zones in areas that have a high crash risk. And we would have 1 per 10,000 residents. So I think we get 1, maybe 2. I have to look and see on that. And it would be up to this body to determine what you all felt were appropriate locations that had a higher crash risk.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
With the higher crash risk, do they have to be adjacent to the school zone, like touching it, or they can be anywhere? So
Those
once
could
you
be-
put a
yeah.
speed camera one place, you can put this basically freebie one anywhere you want?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Okay. Okay, looking a little bit more closely, these are 2 areas that I know there's council interest in. The map on the left is Woodinville High School, and the map on the right is Woodmore Elementary and 124th Avenue. This is a 5-year period of crashes. I'll say that I don't believe there have, I know another question that came up with that we looked at was numbers of pedestrian collisions. There's none. In both these areas over 5 years, there's no pedestrian collisions. Near Woodinville High School, I believe there was 1 bicycle collision 3 years ago on 136th Ave. So just wouldn't make a very sexy map to put those up. So I'm just telling you that. There's just 1 there and none on the others. I know that even though, we're thinking about walkers, of course, whenever we're talking about school zones, I think that in general, bringing speeds down is good for walkers. It's good for drivers. Questions on either of these two?
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
We seem to be focusing on crashes and speed. Is there something to delineate each one of these? Is there a case where it said this crash is actually related to going over speed?
Yeah, we likely can get into the weeds on that. I know that that's like WashDOT data that they record, and so that could certainly be part of any analysis that we do. If this is a program that we're going forward on, we would certainly engage with a traffic engineer who would be doing that, and then likely not just bringing back recommendations to this council of how to do this program, but also where to put these cameras.
Yeah, and one key reason I bring that up is because near the high school, a majority of those crashes appear like they might be on the highway.
Yes.
Which would basically delineate, like, is this an actual issue that is Woodinville-centric, or is this something that we should deal with WashDOT and say, can we reduce the amount of speed on the highway? And gives us some ideas about location.
Yep. It is easy to also pull out and make sure that we are only looking at city streets and not highways on this. The slide I showed with the data of, our crashes compared to other cities was just city streets. We could have done the same thing on this one. Again, this was just kind of first blush at all of this.
Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah. If we go back in time, in our history, maybe early years, we had a council member, Mike Roskin, who was a member of the Sheriff's Department, then later went on to actually sell gear that would collect license plate numbers and such. So this is a few years back. And we wanted speed cameras. People were concerned about speed back then. And he talked us out of it in the sense that he felt that an officer with the car and making a stop and can change can be directed anywhere within the city and change some of the driving habits as opposed to a fixed camera. And so he was kind of a proponent for the speed bumps and I think the ultimate was he was able to justify additional headcount. And I know he was instrumental in the school resource officer because of the type of stuff that was happening around the high school. So if you go back in time and look, this discussion has happened many years ago. I was on Public Safety Commission at the time, and it's interesting. It comes around again, but where I see the hot spots up there, I don't see schools. And I also remember Mr. Roskin mentioning that as a law officer, you kind of keep an eye for the streets. And if you see a lot of animals run over, squirrels, whatever, you see that, then you know that there's a lot of speed in that area and there's kind of an opportunity for enforcement. And he said those were kind of the visual cues as a patrol. You kind of keep an eye for stuff like that, and if you see it a lot, then you know you have a speed problem. And I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Councilmember Taylor, I hear you saying we need more police officers, and I'm saying yes. Let's do that.
Okay.
But I also think, we know that there's a speed problem in these areas. We know there's speeders. All of our studies that whenever we put them out show that too. So I agree that there's benefit in having police officers do traffic enforcement, and I think that this
And then his last comment was, if you don't want to be reelected, bring the cameras in. He kind of said, this is one of those things that agitates the populace, and if you get your name attached to doing that, it just turns out to be very unpopular. Nobody wants to be picked up like, you do it once and then you find a way around town, and you kind of avoid that whole strip altogether. Yeah.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
The line that's around Woodinville High School, is that the 300-foot delineation of how far away it is?
yes, again, just kind of a
It's
quick
bulk,
beat down. Yeah.
right. So obviously the majority of the collisions are at intersections or at least underneath the overpasses. what I'm seeing is that we don't have a lot in that, at least at Woodinville High School. I know at Woodin, it's probably a little bit more concentrated because of where it is in terms of crosswalks. But is it, how do I say this? Are we looking to put a speed camera here as justification for putting one someplace else on the map where we see really high collisions? So is that the purpose of the program, is like put some in the school zones, which we want people to slow down there, and for the most part, especially with traffic being what it is, you can't speed there in the mornings. But is it about the safety, or is it about getting it to some of the hotter spots where we have it, like down by the roundabouts? Is that how we get the speed cameras down there, is by putting it in school areas? I'm just trying to figure out, at least this data that I'm looking at here, it doesn't look as dire as we know it is, but because that extends beyond those 300 feet, is that what we're worried about, is the feeding into the school areas versus the school area itself?
I will say that putting a speed camera in a school zone, does have an effect beyond those 300 feet. We know that drivers will slow down once they know that the camera's there, they'll slow down prior to getting to it, and then they're coming out of that zone slower also. So when you see, these areas with collisions underneath the freeway, likely the drivers coming from the school during those school hours will be driving slower because they're not starting. Well, there's a four-way stop there, but in general, it has an effect outside of that area. And I don't know whether the way the system was set up was, put one here so that you can have one here. That does feel a little bit like what we're looking at in this case. But certainly the state had an interest in putting speed zone cameras in school zones.
Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. This data is great. I really like seeing this. What it doesn't show, though, are all the close calls that happen every single day because people are speeding. And I know specifically, I've gotten a lot of emails from people in this area. I've gone out to meet them. I've gone out to walk with people. There are a lot of people who are speeding through some of these side streets trying to get to school. There's a lot of that. And so I think what this program really is about is, yes, taking a look at the data and where do we have crashes, but also listening to the people in the area and their lived experiences. Their kids are going to and from school. I know the principal at Woodin Elementary has emailed council multiple times begging for more safety measures because kids are having close calls frequently. So while I think the crash data is really great, we also have to look beyond that because none of us want to see a child be hit and killed because we don't have effective safety measures in place. And I will tell you, because I live right by Woodmore, they put in speed cameras on the Bothell side. There is a significant difference in how people drive and how people approach that area. It is incredible, the change in behavior and the safety that the kids who are having to walk from the Bothell side to the Woodinville side who are feeling. And I talk to lots of parents all the time up there, and they're very thankful for it. And they ask frequently, when are we going to get it on the Woodinville side so that the kids who are having to walk a mile and cross multiple streets, they're also safe. So I just want to put that out there. Data's great, crash data's great, but it does not capture all the close calls that happen every day.
Councilmember Arndt.
Thank you. So one of the things on this map with both of these school zones is that they are both on our borders with Bothell. And just because I live near Woodmore, I'm more familiar with kind of the traffic dynamic there. But specifically near the high school, and it looks like Woodin Elementary, it looks like there's no activity over there. Is that because Bothell is capturing that?
Likely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it just seems like there's nothing happening over there, but that's potentially just Bothell capturing that data.
Yeah.
And that would be the same over at Woodmore on that side of the city. Everything around the corner of the school is Bothell's data. So like the pedestrians and the child that was hit the last fall doesn't show up on our data here, even though it's the same school zone.
Right.
So
I don't know whether Bothell has plans to incorporate Woodin Elementary in their traffic their speed safety camera program, but certainly we could talk to them about it and see.
Okay, that was my follow-up question of what sort of conversations need to happen as we're talking about these roads that are right along the shared jurisdiction. Do we need to, if this is something that we want to pursue, particularly in these areas, what conversations need to happen? Is this something that we can do because we own this side of the street? Or do we need an interlocal agreement on these shared boundaries
Yeah,
if we
good question.
decide to pursue this?
Good question. Okay, let me show you another set of maps here. This is potential locations. These are not marked speed zones now, but they do jump out as potential places if the council is interested. And you don't have to decide on this. This is just sort of for your own information. On the left is that the Bright Horizons preschool on 140th. And so potentially, again, that could be 300 feet from that school, which would be the intersection of 140th and 171st. And that 140th is one of our most significant areas for collisions. And then on the right is right out here, the crosswalk. What we did is looked at the crosswalk from Wilmot Gateway Park and thought about a park safety zone, public park zone that extended 3 feet in either direction from there. That intersection, that crosswalk is a challenge for some drivers to understand. And so there's all kinds of interpretations that I see from drivers out there. And slowing cars down approaching that will just give them more time to make good decisions about, should I stop here? So even though, and also the other thing about that is that also slows down drivers as they're approaching 175th and 131st, which is one of our intersections with the most number of collisions. So just another thing to think about. Okay, and then this slide just shows some of the program requirements that are part of the RCW if this is something we're going to go about. There's a lot on here. And I show this basically to point out that this is a lot of work. And one of the reasons why we could not come to you with a request to make a decision up or down on this at this point with all the information, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. This also includes a lot of groundwork of analysis and justification before anything is put in place. And then a lot of reporting on the back end, both to the state and requirements for record keeping and retention, as well as publishing information on the city's website. So a nice thing about this was that we were able to just see what other cities were doing because there's a requirement to post this online. This is not it's not a gotcha. I mean, it is a gotcha when you get the ticket, but it's not supposed to be a surprise, right? The idea is to change driver behavior. And so as public as we can be about this, the better. Certainly if we go down this road, there may be some of this that could be done by a vendor if we're hiring, if that's the route that we're going for with this. But no doubt there's also going to be staff time and traffic engineers that are going to be involved. So for tonight, we're just looking to hear from you a little bit on your interest in this and whether this is something that we want to move forward with, with staff bringing back more information and a recommendation. And then also just generally, if you're interested in only looking at school zones, or if we go down that road, if we are interested in some of those other areas also.
Councilmember Arndt.
Actually, I had a question on the last slide. It said that a city could adopt an ability to pay calculator. What does that look like?
That's a good question. I know that some cities have put that in place where they will, if someone gets a ticket, then part of the response that they can have is to accept the ticket, but give information to show that they deserve a proration on it. And I know that sometimes that's instituted by the courts, sometimes that's done by the vendors. I don't know exactly what information they require to justify that, but the RCW explicitly says that that's an option for cities that want to consider it.
Okay, thank you. I think that is a very intriguing possibility, especially, I think that is one of the big arguments against this kind of thing, is that it disproportionately impacts certain communities with the ticket price. And so being able to implement something in that nature, I think would go a long way to making sure that this isn't hitting our lowest income residents the hardest. I know I'm certainly in favor of exploring this option around our school zones particularly. We get a lot of people writing in from the area around Wooden Elementary School and the high school, and I know I speak to a lot of parents up near Woodmore who would really appreciate this in terms of safety for their children walking to school. So I would be happy to further explore that myself.
Councilmember Evans.
Yeah, if we could go forward to the next slide. I am definitely in favor of exploring this. I would like to take a look and see what the cost-benefit payoffs are. I think we should also be explicit about engaging, especially people who have school-age children that walk to school, and listening to what they have to say, because I know I've gotten many emails and many community members reaching out about scary incidents. I know just last year I emailed you about one where a middle schooler was just about hit and had to jump out of the way and fell down. So I would be interested in that. I would also be interested, Wilmot Gateway down here was the one that popped out for me as well. I have seen so many close calls with people who just blow past the red light and don't realize that there's a crosswalk there, and they're coming very quickly down there. So I'm in favor of exploring those two and just seeing what this means, and definitely seeking community engagement.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
One of the big concerns I have is third-party vendors. Their security is not great. The state has stringent rules for us as a municipality, but as soon as we go with a third-party vendor, we're at the mercy of their rules. And it's very easy to correlate information like your home address, the car you drive, your license plate, and what time of day you're likely driving away from your home. This is incredibly important and personal data. And yes, the state has provisions for us as a city, but we don't have that same sort of ability to manage a vendor and manage their third-party management of data and information. So I personally have really grave concerns over that. I happen to be married to someone who works in security, and it's rubbed off on me. That is a major concern. The other concern I have is, what are we going to do with this money that we're raising? So part of this is that we're raising money for safety. Obviously, we're going to improve safety in those areas. What does that look like? What are we going to point to that people are paying these fines for? This is what your fines are paying for. This is going to pay for speed bumps. This is going to pay for crossing guards. This is going to pay for something else. I think that we need to have an idea of what is it we're funding, and I would hate to see personally in areas where you have the most collisions, that you have the most money. For example, Kirkland on 132nd, far and away that has the vast majority of where those collisions are. I haven't seen any improvements on that road. Kirkland is using it elsewhere. I think we have to be honest about where are these collisions occurring and where are we going to be paying for improvements. If we're getting a lot of speeding by Wooden or by Woodmore, all the money collected in those areas should go to those areas. It should be proportional to where the problem is. Until we have that fleshed out, along with my very grave concerns about the correlation and data privacy and data mining, I have a really hard time, because the only jurisdiction I'm aware of that has 3 years of data is Kirkland. And again, where they have the majority of collisions, if you look at just 132nd, those numbers haven't budged in 3 years. And that bothers me. So what they had done in their staff reports is they averaged over 3 years and said, well, the average collision rate has gone down. Yes, that's true, but at certain locations it hasn't, and particularly around the busiest schools. So Wooden and Woodmore, I think, are probably the busiest schools that we have. If the program in Kirkland hasn't seen a decrease along those particular pathways, I don't know if we would be any more successful. I also think that there's nothing that scares someone more than some blue lights flashing behind them. And a parking ticket versus a moving violation, you react very differently with your driving patterns. And I think that there are a lot of people in Woodinville who could afford a $136 ticket. And I think that's unfair. And until we can adopt a Finland model where it's proportional to income, there will be those who have means who will speed and pay the ticket and not learn a thing. So with those two reasons, I'd like to tap the brakes on this, which of course most people should do in a school zone. Between the data and the information that I've seen out of Kirkland, I'm not optimistic, particularly with 132nd, because that is a major school zone and everyone knows about it. And they're still ticketing 9,000 people a year. I mean, that's just a shocking number. And that's a 3-year-old program. So for now, I am concerned that this is more bureaucracy than it is really managing the safety. And if safety is what we're looking for, then this is where we can pile onto Asha's already really full plate and find out other ways to improve the roads there. But this, I don't think, is what I'm looking for right now. I'd like something a little bit more concrete.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, I do support moving forward with this, and I would like to focus on the school zones to begin this. I think that's the area of focus in terms of safety for our children in the community. I think that's where this program should focus to begin with.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
So fairly recently, we placed some signs that actually gave speed indication and gave warnings to slow down. Are those signs working? Can we get that data from those to see if this is something that we can put in place to actually better justify putting in speed cameras? My concern and fear with moving forward with the idea of speed cameras is the money spent on contracting and mobilizing on the speed cameras. We probably wouldn't be able to actually fund the road improvements that we would require, because the outlay for the cameras would put us in an odd place just to get started. And then we would have to effectively desire people to get caught by that camera in order to do additional road improvements. So it sets up I guess, a poor state of wanting people to actually speed in order to better fund. And I don't know that we would necessarily lean on the funding. I'm not fearful of that. I think that we have a lot of other ways to work with this. I see that the law would also actually allow us to give ways to make things more affordable for the people who are unable to afford, especially if they're not reoffenders. But one of the final things that I'll add to this is that external contractors make me very nervous. I am also in technology and believe that data bias is one of the largest things that we are looking into the future that will affect everyone. And putting this data bias piece on the record is something that I would not want to pursue. My greatest desire would be able to enable us to actually do the road changes that would slow traffic by using roads that are properly designed for the desired speed. And I think that that's the long tail. If we're saying, let's put a camera in place to slow people down until we can get the road improvements, let's skip that step and just get to the road improvements. And that would be my desire. So I would probably skip moving forward on this and figure out, do we actually have a problem by using that sign, which I think we said when we brought this up, is a sign that we can move. Let's gather the data. Let's see if that data actually puts us in a situation where we want to take further action. And that would be why I would move forward with this and move towards another mode of figuring things out.
Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, I'm in favor of taking a look at the data, and I'd like to look at it a different way. So the camera is good for 30 minutes before school starts, 30 minutes after the beginning of school. So it's like 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon. So that's 2 hours. I would like to see how the accidents or the traffic issues line up against those 2 hours per day and see what that might look like. So is it around school time, or is it around more afternoon or early morning commutes? So I'd like to understand if it's school related. The other is considering a 2 hour per day fixed system that doesn't provide any immediate, I think Councilmember Best-Campbell kind of said it best. When you see the blue light behind you, you look, and then you're going to change your habits right there, as opposed to the long delay of it's got to go through a process, it's going to come back in, it's going to come through the mail, and at that point, it's a long time from driving fast and understanding exactly when it was that you were going through. So I'd like to see a review. If you had this money and you can do it with officers with equipment, what would that look like? Could you do it more effectively and with a system that actually puts points on insurance, makes penalties that mean something and possibly will impact the speeding. And I think it's also helpful that if we have a situation that changes within the city, you might have more flexibility to address, if you were to do it with a car and a speed camera or radar or something like that. So maybe take a look at it both ways and come up with a plan. Thank you.
So I'll make a statement, then I have a question. So I think we should be proactive. I don't think we wait for a child in a school zone to be hit and say, oh man, we should have done something. I think we be proactive about that. I think that's what the citizens of Woodinville, the residents of Woodinville deserve. It was kind of shocking to me to see that Bothell and Kirkland 50% per capita less crashes. These are one of the things that they're doing to calming down speeds. I know from firsthand experience on 124th that when I got pulled over in a school zone on a very straight roadway there, I didn't speed again. So I know that it works firsthand. I know that most people, it'd be the right thing, whether you can afford it or not. I don't think people go into a school zone thinking, I'm going to speed. I think most of the time it's just not paying attention, not aware what the speed is, and this is a way to make people aware. So I'm in favor of this in a school zone. I'd like to see a 2-year trial or something where we can look at it, evaluate it, and say, did it work? So we collect the data and then reevaluate. The revenue from it, we constantly get, some of it's been cited here where we have residents wanting improvements to areas around school zones, whether it's sidewalks or speed bumps, or I get those emails all the time. And this is a way to actually make that happen in those areas. I would like to see the money go to improvements in these school zones. I think our residents deserve that. I was particularly struck by the 90% survival rate of speeds for people under 25, I think it was. 9 out of 10 by the data didn't receive a second ticket, so I think that's a sign that it's working. We have to face a reality in that we have been down 2 officers, I think it is, for quite a few years, and there is no end in sight. Police recruiting is tough right now, as everybody's seen in the news and by the hiring bonuses and retention bonuses and all these things. I don't see any near future of us solving that 2-officer problem. And this is a way to do traffic mitigation, speed mitigation cost effectively, because with pay and benefits, an officer's probably $200,000 a year. And so this is a technology. Last time this was looked at, the technology's been leaps and bounds above what it used to be. So I think this is a good direction. So the whole thing about blue lights are going to solve this. Can you comment? That's my question. Can you comment on, is that likely if we turn this down, or you have the capacity to actually emphasize, because I know that there was when we were talking about the radar speed cameras, that was a justification for that, because you just didn't have the capacity to have officers, you know, in front of Chrysalis, in front of Woodmore, in front of Woodin and Woodinville High School on a regular basis. Just don't have that capacity. Can you address that?
I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but I was at a meeting a few months back looking at how many tickets Woodinville PD wrote into Kirkland Municipal Court. And it was something like maybe 200 a year. So 200 tickets written like for a year. Obviously, that's less than one a day. Compare that to what you'd get out of a camera like this. It just would touch more people than traffic officers would. Now, I think there's a lot of benefit to having more traffic officers, and I will probably come ask you for some at some point. So keep that in the back of your mind. But we aren't staffed to reliably do traffic enforcement. I wish we were, but we're not at this point. And it is a significant cost increase. There is a lot of flexibility to police officers, and we can do more than just speed enforcement. There's a lot of other work that those officers can be doing that's good. But this is a different thing, really, than police officers pulling over cars.
Thank you. I'm in favor of certainly exploring this and talking about. So, on the same constraints that we have for our police officers, we have staffing constraints too. Because I worked with the city long enough to know one of the first questions or problems going to be is if we do this, you know, the maintenance, the staffing, all those questions. So I think we should look at it and consider the problems, but without that, I think I lean towards a vendor. Some questions have been raised about the data privacy. I'd like to have that addressed. So I'm in favor of exploring this a little bit further. And I know that at one point you talked about licensed readers. I'm a little bit more skeptical on that. So maybe you could bring some of that back too at that time. But that's, I think we start in a school zone, I think would be the safest, you know. I think that's what our residents want, and I think that's what they deserve. Deputy Mayor Randolph.
A couple of quick questions, like what's the scope entail? Would we get pricing and the things that have been raised by council? Like what's the expectation of considering the exploration? What's the end result of the exploration?
I guess what we'd expect to come back to council with is probably some analysis on what locations make sense. I know, and certainly we'll come back with ideas for what the vendor route would look like. Whether using a vendor that is, you know, fully violator funded, or whether there would be some initial cost outlay from the city. I know are all options. I'm sure we would take a look and see about what it would take to just buy this equipment ourselves and do it. And I know part of that is also, when I talked to a vendor one time, I tried to get a sense of, you know, how quickly what's the rate? How much money do you take off the top for each infraction? You know, what's your cut from it? And they said that the way that many vendors approach this is they have a 3 to 6 month hope to recoup their costs in installing the equipment and paying for it. And so they determine that based on doing analysis of those zones to find out how many likely violators they would be, and then kind of figure out what the right percentage of is on that. So there's quite a bit of work that goes on the front end, not only just to figure out where to put these and how to justify them, but how to get a vendor to actually support that and a use there.
So the vendor would actually introduce that as part of the contract. It's like, yes, we can make our money back.
Yeah, right. If we put it in a school zone that there's only 10 people driving through there, they're going to have a very different, you know, scheme that they put together on the funding on that than one with 1,000 people driving through. So all of that would be done. We would likely also, part of the requirement on this would be to have an ordinance. The city has to pass an ordinance on this. So that would also be work that we would likely bring to council. There's a lot. What else? Let me know if there's other particular things you had questions about.
Is there a cursory cost off the top of your head that came to mind while researching?
No, I really have no idea what it would be. And it was more like they were saying that, to be honest, I talked to one vendor on this so far, and they said that that cities will start seeing money back on it like month one. So you sign a contract, they put it in place, and then the city starts getting revenue month one on it.
And one last thing, can you go back to the slide with the cities and the accidents per capita?
Yes.
I found that very curious. I was just curious, what the heck is going on in Snohomish? But
I don't know. I used to live there.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
Where does the money go when it goes to the state? Is there a fund specifically that it goes into? Have we ever asked for money from that fund? We're waiting for significant funds from the state, and we would be giving them money at a time when we're waiting for our own money. Is it a fund that is specific to school improvements, or is it pedestrian and bike improvements anywhere? I would hate to see all of the money that we presumably are going to get from all of these infractions going into a fund that could go somewhere in Eastern Washington that is going to be a highway improvement, as opposed to, is it going to be, do they allocate it regionally proportional to what you bring in on these speed cameras? Does it have to be safety programs for schools, or does it have to be park improvement, depending on where this money comes from? It just feels, because if any money that goes to Olympia is, where?
That's a great question. Yeah, so kind of like what we mentioned earlier, currently how the law is written, 50% of the revenue goes back to the state, and then this would be approximately, I believe, June 2028, that would transition to 25% back to the state. And the fund that is sent to is called the Cooper Jones Active Transportation Safety Account. It's used to fund grants for bicycle and pedestrian and non-motorist safety programs. I'm happy to look into how those funds are allocated or some examples of what those grants look like, but to my knowledge, we've never applied for anything from that account.
I think it would be nice to see what grants people have done that have been successful in the past, and what are the criteria for a successful grant application? Is it that you have put in a lot of the money yourself? Is it just luck of the draw? Is it expanded over the state? Is it more regionalized? I know Western Washington is far more progressive in terms of willing to tax itself, but that also means that a lot of state money then goes to Eastern Washington, and then we end up retaxing ourselves. So I want to see where this money is going and the likelihood of it actually coming back to us, because if we're doing all of the legwork and we're doing all this capital outlay to improve transportation projects in other parts of the state, yeah, that makes us feel good, but the whole purpose of the program is to help here locally. So I'd like to see how generous this program is with people who have historically put a lot of money in versus people who are just applying for grants.
Great, yeah, happy to include that in the next steps. Thank you.
So, Jared, you said 2028, June of 2028, is that?
Correct, yeah, that switches to 25%.
So if we were to implement this, we're probably looking at 25. So 3 years, that 50% would drop down to 25%. Is that?
I need to look at the specifics of the timeline and make sure it's not 4 years after implementation date, or if June 2028 is when statewide all of the programs switch to that 25%. So I'd be happy to include that information going forward.
Okay, and I'd certainly want to see a breakdown as far as how city resources could be used to improve sidewalks and speed bumps and other traffic calming ideas, bike lanes, wider shoulders, soft shoulders, whatever would be appropriate around school zones. That I would be particularly interested in seeing how we could incorporate that safety measures around school zones.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, and another one, if the funding for additional police would be an issue, Something else that I saw a few years back out in Wellington area, we had, and this is probably before your time, we had pretty much angry mama and papa bears about the traffic go out there during the school hours and actually videotape the type of traffic, and they put that onto into a website, and they were out there really making, slow down, kind of a campaign. I don't know if that's something we want to do too, because that gets the message out. And I know that there were a few people that yelled at the people that were driving fast, and they made their point, and it kind of slowed down for a while. And I don't see it too much anymore, but I do know for a while it was pretty hectic when they opened up some of the roadway around Wellington. So lots of different ways to address the problem.
Do we feel like we got what we need at this point?
Yep, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. That was very good. I appreciate it. Okay, business item number 13, public hearing and approval of resolution number 644, Transportation Improvement Program. And who's taking this?
That'll be me. I'll be giving
Mr. O'Neill.
Yeah, I'll be giving the presentation, and Asha will be assisting if needed. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. First things first, I would recommend opening the public hearing, and then I can move into the presentation, and we can take public testimony, if any.
I move to open the public hearing accepting public testimony on 2025-2030 TIP.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Public hearing is open. Have anybody signed up in the public hearing? Thank you. Okay. Do I have a second motion?
I move to close the public hearing on the 2025 to 2030 TIP.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Mr. O'Neill.
All right, great. Thank you. So this item is on our Transportation Improvement Program, not to be confused with our Capital Improvement Program. Some of this may sound familiar. I mentioned it during my CIP presentation at the last meeting, but just a very brief summary of what this is. The Transportation Improvement Program is a 6-year plan, similar to our Capital Improvement Plan. But the TIP, the difference is that the TIP is required by RCW, and it is that RCW requires that it be completed and submitted to the state by the end of June. So the unfortunate part of this is it doesn't quite line up with our capital improvement planning process, which you will see when you look at the TIP. Some of our estimates, we weren't able to get them in time. We're continuing to flush those out during the CIP planning process. But we'll continue to refine those as that process continues. What this document is and why it's different from our capital improvement plan is that this is how we tell the state and our neighboring jurisdictions what we have going on. It really is less about the money and the estimates and more about finding synergy with other projects that are out there, as well as applying for grant funds. To apply for certain grants, we must have projects on our transportation improvement plan, and we must follow this RCW by having it submitted to the state by the end of June each year. So unlike the CIP where we do it every other year, we do this every year. So what the TIP is not. So it's not fiscally constrained. We're not assigning any money. We're not locking ourselves into any of these figures that are on here. It really is just kind of a planning document. Nothing, I don't want to say nothing is prioritized because there are some prioritized items in here, but those just reflect previous council actions through the CIP process. But tonight we are not prioritizing any items. and I'll get kind of into how the plan is made up on the next slide. And then we're not committing to any project at this time other than those projects that we have already committed to. And then again, these aren't final estimates. We'll continue to refine those, and we do from year every year anyways, and as we start projects, things obviously change. So in the TIP itself, there are 3 categories. There are projects that are partially or fully funded. Those are projects that council allocated funding to during the previous budget process. There is a second section that is unfunded projects. So those are typically the projects that kind of fall in the 4 to 6 year range for our CIP. So funding hasn't been assigned to them, but they are there, ready to be reprioritized during the next process. And then the third section is all of the new projects we've added this year. So we use the same, or we use the data received through the CIP process to fund that section of the TIP. So those are all the new projects, all the suggestions from the public, from staff, projects that have come from the various plans we've accomplished this last year, like the transportation plan. So those are in that category. And that category is what we're going to be looking at divvying up a little later this year as we work through the CIP for what receives funding and what does not. So in total, there are 57 projects, 19 new projects that will be included in the 25-30 CIP. There are 7 additional long-range TIP projects. These are projects that have been there for I don't know how many years, but we just kind of keep them on there so they're on our radar, just in case the state says, hey, we have this gigantic pot of money we want to give you. Do you have anything? They're there. We have roughly $45 million in allocated funding, so that's for that first section, money that was allocated in previous budget cycles. And then in total, we have over $252 million in total estimated costs for all of the projects, funded, unfunded, and new projects that are being added. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the recommended motion is on the screen as well.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
2 things. One of them, there was a question in the previous agenda item about speed cameras, and we have a placeholder in the TIP for $600,000. Is that based on the estimate that Kirkland had given us of $120,000 per speed camera times 5 speed cameras?
I can't tell you exactly what that's based off of. That was provided by one of our traffic engineers as we were going through and creating estimates. So it's kind of a shot in the dark because we didn't have the guidance from the previous, so we just kind of put a placeholder in there. Again, going to be refined as we work through the process.
Okay, and then there's an item on here that I looked at the map, and it's ambiguous at best and Bothell at worst, ST 17003. It's the sidewalk on 132nd between 186 and 192nd. That's that part of Woodinville that kind of juts out into Bothell, and then it goes to Bothell on the other side. So is this one of those projects where we're going to have to partner with Bothell? And as a minor suggestion, if they're doing traffic camera work in school zones and we're doing traffic camera work in school zones, that's called a joint grant proposal. And that might look really good for the state. But because that's a really important project for us, and I would imagine it's important for Bothell, I don't know how we can put a little asterisk by that and say if this is a project that's going to require interjurisdictional work. I don't know how many other projects we have on here looking through, but if we could call those out for future council understanding and edification, I think that would be important because that will change what grants we can ask for and when we look for it and how we ask for it, and the Cooper Jones Fund might be something we could use for that particular one at least.
Noted. Thank you. And that, I believe the next time I'll be talking to you about these projects is where we will start to go through the prioritization exercise of what will receive funding and what won't. Part of what we do internally as staff is when we're ranking these objectively, we have a category for synergy with other projects, and that one would rank higher in that because of its proximity to Bothell and the benefit to both jurisdictions.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 644, adopting the 6-year transportation improvement program for the years 2025 through 2030 for submission to the Washington State Secretary of Transportation and Washington State Transportation Improvement Board.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Deputy Mayor, any discussion?
No discussion. This, to me, is part of the process of us actually getting grants from the state. So nothing really to discuss, and I don't feel like a lot of it's controversial as long as we get to discuss it at a future date in terms of prioritization.
Okay, no other discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you. Business item number 14, adoption of resolution number 645, modifying the 2024-2025 Councilmember Committee assignments. And this is Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Okay.
And it should be showing up here in 1 second. All right. Good evening, Honorable Mayor Millman and council members. For this item, we are seeking for council to select an alternate board member for the NPRSA board in the event that the primary member, Councilmember Arndt, is unable to attend. NPRSA is currently conducting a needs assessment for a new community services or new community center and has an increased opportunity for board member involvement. So it'd be great to make sure we have as much participation in this forum as possible. The NPRSA is governed by a 7-member board, and that is including the city of Bothell, Kenmore, Woodinville, and then representatives from King and Snohomish County as well. For your information, board meetings typically take place on the 3rd Wednesday of each month at 5 p.m., and they are in person or virtual, if that impacts your ability to participate. Here you can see the current assignments, and the vacancy we are looking to fill is there in red. Sorry, that's a little bit small. And thank you. With that, there is a recommended motion on the screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I have a question. So was this something we missed? Because usually we have an alternate when we do the committee assignments, or is it something I missed because doing the committee assignments?
With this one, I believe we had the NPRSA board. We did not have an alternate originally assigned, and it could have been staff representative, and then NPRSA reached out and asked to have an actual council member alternate if possible.
Okay. I want to say this is timely because last council meeting we identified, or not identified, we instructed city manager to explore some possible property acquisition to forward to the NPRSA for a possible rec center / pool site. So I think having an alternate for this is timely. I know that there's on occasion that they have trouble reaching a quorum. So I think that's, and that's no comment on our representative. It's just, I know that they sometimes struggle with that. So if I'm not quite clear if I make this recommendation as for a committee assignment, or is this, we're waiting for motion? If I make the recommendation, I'm going to recommend Councilmember Evans.
Great. Yes. For committee member assignments, the mayor would make the nomination, and then the council could confirm that.
Okay. Any other discussion, comments? Councilmember Evans.
So I would be happy to be the alternate here. I also would just like to flag the East Rail. Just the last meeting, they changed it at the last minute, and it overlapped with another committee that I'm on. So I know you had to step in, Mr. Hill. So I'm just wondering if, at the same time, if we should look at that. But I'm happy to be the alternate to Councilmember Arndt for this.
Yeah, East Rail has a lot going on as well, so I think that's timely.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
I would also say the NPRSA is still working through a grant that is a levy from the jurisdictions of Bothell, Woodinville, and Kenmore to rebuild the senior center in Bothell. Part of the job, most of the job has been fixing some of the major problems with that. There's a lot of technical information and building information. It's not just the fun stuff of building this rec center, which has been in the process for years and years. There is still the levy that they're managing, and it's also the future levy that's going to be likely managed in terms of, is there going to be more money necessary to rebuild the senior center, and will there be money for maintenance costs? So it is not just the pool, it's not just the rec center, it's also maintenance and ongoing maintenance and repairs of the NPRSA building. So just throwing that out there for everybody.
Any other discussion? Do we have a motion?
I move that the City Council adopt resolution number 645, amended to designate Council Member Evans as the alternate appointee to NPRSA, establishing the 2024-2025 Council Member Committee assignments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Councilmember Evans. We have anybody for the second public comment period? Nope. Report of City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I kind of like not having to say anything till right at the end of the meeting, so that's kind of nice. We've got a great staff that can handle that for me. I have two items this evening, just briefly. One of them, we were notified last week. Many of you recall we applied for the NOAA grant, and this was for our 195th, 134th culvert replacement project. That grant was not selected for funding. In the letter that we got, they mentioned that they had 4 times as much requests as they had funding, so it's probably no surprise that we weren't successful in that one. We can evaluate next year if we want to go after that one again or not. That being said, of course, we're all still crossing our fingers, toes, and everything else for our raise grant that we should hear from here in June pretty quick. And then the second item, looking forward to your July meeting dates. In consultation with the mayor and deputy mayor, I think we're looking at changing those dates because the first one would fall that week of July 4th, which is on a Thursday. So we're looking at July 9th and July 23rd. That kind of keeps those meetings spaced out through July and avoids any back-to-back meetings. So those will be the dates for the July meetings. You can mark those on your calendars. That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Reports to council members. Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. This is just, the state has already said that we're going to be in for a drought for the summer and that fire danger is high. And I'm just wondering if we've engaged with our fire department and or taken a look at public safety measures. So perhaps that could be just a weekly report update that you provide to us. It's just something that's been on my mind since that's been in the news, aside from the past couple days. And that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, I think our conversations we actually had were timely. Last week at the Puget Sound Regional Council's annual meeting, the big theme this year was traffic safety. Our region is facing an upward trend in terms of deaths due to traffic collisions, and working together in our region, each doing our part, is going to be a huge thing to move our region forward and making sure that we get as close to 0 deaths as possible, because even 1 death is way too many when it comes to things that are preventable on the road.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Nothing this evening, thanks.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
Just one thing, I wanted to thank the people who reached out to me personally. I was not at the last meeting. My mother had surgery, so I was there taking care of her, and I wanted to thank the people who actually reached out to ask how she's doing. She had a follow-up procedure today, and of course I couldn't be there, but I want to thank the people who did reach out and ask how she's doing. She's 74, so she's doing, yeah, thank you for everybody who asked.
Councilmember Arndt.
Thank you. First, yesterday afternoon, we had the grand unveiling of an art project that students from Wellington Elementary and Woodmore Elementary have been working on. They were able to hang ornaments in Wilmot Gateway Park in the trees that coincided with Pollinator Week. So you can go out throughout this summer and see the ornaments that are hanging from the trees that should be there throughout the summer. Students had an opportunity to participate in this public art, learn about the public art process, and also learn more about pollinators and why the city is supporting pollinators. So it was a great time. There were popsicles. and we didn't get blown away or rained out. So hopefully that's something that everyone can go check out over the summer months. The students were very excited to see their work displayed in public. And the other thing, our comments from Ms. Antoine tonight reminded me why we as a city need to be looking into implementing some tenant protections. Simple things as extending the notice required for significant rent increases do help our residents. So I'd love to see that come forward on an agenda in the future. Thank you.
Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, over the weekend, I was working with the group that, okay, so at the end of the last legislative session, there was a bill that kind of impacts a lot of the neighbors, a lot of people here that heat their house or cook with natural gas. And so there's initiative 2066 that is going around right now trying to reverse that direction that would allow customers to choose whether they want to continue using natural gas and new construction and restaurants, many restaurants use gas as well. So it would be a very restrictive enactment of legislation. And so this is just an opportunity. If people knock at your door and want you to take a look and sign that, it's something to consider. Thank you.
A few things, a couple things. One of the more fun things to do as a council member is putting groups together to do cool things for Woodinville. Recently, I was able to take a tour of the Columbia Winery building. The new owner is proposing opening up the wine tasting there and a 500 person event space, which is indoor event space, which is needed in this city because most venues are somewhere around the 250 person indoor space. Along those lines, Woodinville Repertory, which is a nonprofit, I put them in contact with the new ownership over there, and they're exploring partnerships and some grant opportunities that are available to a nonprofit to be able to add lighting and speakers and remodel that space to make it a really cool space. So I thought that was a great opportunity. Along the same lines, Woodinville Arts Alliance and Pollinator Pathways put them together on to have some discussions. Woodinville Arts Alliance wants to do some pollinator-themed art along our proposed trail and park, linear park that we're talking about. I have no artistic ability, but they had mentioned some sculptures that would have like a flower and maybe a bee and that type of thing. And so I thought it'd be appropriate to have Pollinator Pathways and Woodinville Arts Alliance kind of figure out what might be possible. And the last thing, I just happened to be here and there was a CPR class going on. Was that a city-sponsored event? There was about 17 residents. The instructor was a Eastside Fire paramedic, and they're doing some instruction on CPR and AED usage. So I thought that was kind of cool. So that's all I have.
Motion to adjourn?